we see that how easy it is to actually have a vindictiveness to the Department of Justice to be weaponized in a way we've never seen before. And I'll say it's actually quite scary, and one I never envisioned I would see in my lifetime in this country.
Mark, to what extent should we say, and can we say, that James Comey's indictments make him the latest victim of a Trump retribution agenda?
I think it's very clear that he is, and I don't think we need to even take my word. We just listen to the words of Donald Trump and his allies. Anyone can go on X and look at the key members of those from Project 2025 and what they're saying. This was a predicted event. I dare say we could probably create a list of 5 at least other individuals who are probably next to fall. And it's pretty much a script that they have written, and now they're playing it out.
In terms of how this is actually being played out, isn't it true and fair to say that this is only possible because the US justice system is so overtly politicized anyway?
It's interesting. My first experience with a government was the British government. I actually worked in the House of Commons back in 1988 for the Tories when Margaret Thatcher was Prime Minister. Absolutely loved it. Greatest experience I probably have had for a job. And there were very interesting differences between the two systems. Now, having worked in and around the government, never worked in the government, always represented people who work in the government for 30 plus years, never at least the federal level. What we have seen with Donald Trump, especially in the second administration, is how fragile the American democracy actually is. We are based very much off of, obviously, the British system, but the norms are what control a lot of how our practice operates. And we have now seen that it doesn't take much to exploit the loopholes, the things that normally people would never say out loud, which now the Trump administration does. And we see that how easy it is to actually have a vindictiveness to the Department of Justice to be weaponized in a way we've never seen before. And I'll say it's actually quite scary, and one I never envisioned I would see in my lifetime in this country.
Does that apply equally to both sides of the political divide in the US then? Because when I was looking back, I realised that Joe Biden made it really quite clear that he would stop at nothing to try to end Trump's political career. I caught this from 2022. Quote, "I'm making sure he, under legitimate efforts of our Constitution, does not become the next president again." And that he was angry at Merrick Garland, Attorney General that he appointed. The Washington Post reported he blamed him for not moving aggressively enough to prosecute Donald Trump for the Capitol riot on January the 6th in 2021. I do wonder if justice is so politicized that both sides want to try to capitalize on their ability to pursue rivals.
I mean, look, there is a level of politicization that exists on both sides of the aisle. I mean, prosecutors are part of the government, when one obviously looks at it. And they, in some jurisdictions in the United States, you have to run for office rather than be appointed as you are at the federal level. And I think the difference, though, there's a few things that are quite different. One, you generally saw, and this was not just Democrats, this was previous Republicans also, you saw a disconnection between the Department of Justice and the White House. You saw a level of independence. Yes, of course, the Attorney General of the United States is appointed and confirmed by the U.S. Senate, but appointed by the political party in power. But in Democratic and Republican administrations in at least modern history, they had an independence to them that we don't see today, right? We just saw last week Donald Trump tweeting out, whether that was supposed to be a private message or maybe an act, or who knows, or accidentally sent publicly, essentially telling his attorney general what to do, who to go after, and to do it forthwith, as quickly as possible. Donald Trump says the things out loud that others would only say privately, and that impacts negatively the rule of law. I would never say that you don't necessarily see it sometimes on the other side. I think the New York State Attorney General prosecution, the Georgia prosecution had much more politics involved. You had elected district attorneys and attorney generals running on a campaign to go after Donald Trump. They still filtered into the judicial system, which is far less, if not almost entirely, apart from politics in the same way. But nonetheless, the cases got to where they got to some extent based on politics. At the federal level, you typically didn't see that, hence why, as you read the quote, Joe Biden is criticizing the attorney general for not acting because he wasn't told to act. He was acting independently.
Yeah, it's fascinating, isn't it, to consider that. I also wanted to ask you, Mark, about, I suppose, how those within the justice system respond at a time like this. Albeit potentially an exceptional case, James Comey's son-in-law has quit the Department of Justice after these indictments this weekend. And it did make me wonder, obviously he has real proximity to these indictments, so I understand that it might be slightly different. But I do wonder, as prosecutors, as officials, whether it is better to protest these sorts of actions from within the Department of Justice, or whether it is better to get out of the Department of Justice. I don't know what your take on that might be.
Colin, that's we used to have a game show here in the United States. I wouldn't doubt it maybe came from England originally, called the $64,000 question back in the 1950s. Not worth a lot of money now, but back then that was a lot, right? And that's a saying, of course, it probably exists on both sides of the pond. And I have many former members of the Department of Justice who I represent who have been fired and were suing the administration. And I'm advising many others who still remain inside the U.S. government about that very question. Do you stay in and do what you can in order to not subvert the administration, but protect the rule of law? Or do you quit in protest and you make it public? And we see a lot of both. We saw James Comey's daughter get fired. We saw a prosecutor today who refused to indict James Comey be fired. We saw the U.S. attorney out in San Francisco, I think it was, apparently got fired also because she told the government that they needed to abide by a court order. We saw today, in fact, 16 or so FBI personnel fired because during the George Floyd, one of the marches, they took a knee in respect to the people who were protesting in favor of George Floyd. And Kash Patel, our FBI director, just fired them all without any due process. I think it's a very difficult question. Now, thankfully, this is not Nazi Germany, so that if you get found out, you get executed. This is still the United States of America, so the worst that will happen is you'll be fired. So I think for many people, it's a very individual choice, right? What's your family situation? How old are you? How much money do you need to pay the mortgage, on the first of the month? What kind of flexibility you have? What kind of principled stand do you want to make? I am all for, and I'll finish on this note, I'm all for people speaking out as I advise them, because to me, and again, I'm not comparing it to Nazi Germany at all, but the notion of authoritarianism and the famous poem about, they came for the socialists and I didn't say anything because I'm not a socialist. And they came for the Jews. I didn't say anything because I'm not Jewish. They came for me and there was no one left to say anything.
Mark, it's really interesting speaking to you. Thank you very much indeed. Actually, I just have one more for you. Is this an exceptional chapter when it comes to the politicization of justice?
This is a time in American history that we have never seen on a national level. There are instances in our history that you can look to where civil rights were a problem, where racism, anti-Semitism, flouting of law when the states were much stronger than against the federal government system. The notion of McCarthyism in the Red Scare in the 50s. There were certainly places in the South of the United States where I would not want to have been as an African American or as someone who's Jewish or or interracial. But that wasn't the case like where I grew up outside of New York City. You didn't experience any of that in modern times, in decades. But now, what is going on in the United States is national in its scope, which we've never seen before. Now, for sure, there are people around the country who don't feel this at all. And that's kind of the scary part, that because it doesn't impact them personally, they just kind of shrug off the damage to the rule of law and everything that's happening. That, they pay attention to what's my gas price, what's the price of eggs, and things like that. And at some point in time, it kind of goes to the poem that I said, if you don't speak out, by the time you do, you might realize there's no one else left until they come for you. This is a really dangerous time in United States history. And I would say I look to that, to our allies like Great Britain and the other, what we call the Five Eyes, because if it happens here, it can happen there. And I never thought I would utter those kind of words.